Welcome to the Strong Bull Podcast, where serious athletes come to get after it. No shortcuts, no nonsense, proven methods backed by real science and training that hits hard. With over 40 years of combined experience, we're here to help you train smarter, lift heavier, and stay ahead of the game. Thanks for listening. All right, guys, welcome back to the Strong Bull Podcast. Again, I'm your host with my co-host, Dom Dixon, here with my boy, Rob Dela Cruz. We appreciate you guys tuning in each week. We're having a great time making these episodes and continue to pump them out. So let's go ahead and dive right in, Rob. We got a great topic today. Me and you are very passionate about this topic. In particular, I know you have taught me a ton about this topic and this modality with conditioning. Now, when most people hear the word conditioning, I know me, my sports background goes back to hatred. I hated conditioning growing up. One thing, when you're on the football field and they're like, all right, guys, we got some conditioning to do. Usually it is associated with punishment. But as you get older, you start to learn and you start to develop, conditioning is the secret tool for a lot of modalities, a lot of sports, a lot of general practices. So with you, what does conditioning mean in the average program and how important is it?
Well, conditioning to me is really important. And there's always like a blowback, like they're going back and forth between heart health and some people use it for fat loss, which is not great for fat loss, but lung function and heart health, it's great for. And it's a really important tool. And especially even if you're a strength athlete,
Yeah.
it can enhance the strength. Now, it can pull or interfere with strength. There's no doubt, and especially like if it's programmed wrong, poorly.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I couldn't agree more with that. I definitely had that thought process when I think CrossFit was probably the first introduction to interval training for me. Like, playing sports, we didn't do much. At least I didn't think it was interval training at the time. I thought it was more so conditioning for sport or for play, for game speed and for overall game endurance. But CrossFit was the first time I actually got introduced to interval training, learning, different gears that the body had to adapt to, pacing, breathing, all those things. And I did it incorrectly for a long time. For me, it was just like conditioning for the Metcon, right? Like trying to get better, trying to get faster, whether that meant form out the window or fatigue set in. It was like, how best can you suffer? When conditioning, I don't know if you agree, it's the complete opposite. It's not about how much can you suffer. It's how much can you sustain, and you can use your, aerobic system to build a bigger capacity to do more work in your own allotted time, right? I think CrossFit's kind of like, we put you in this box, you got to do this much in this small box. When you do aerobic work, you kind of can create your own dimensions of a box, right?
Yeah, I like that because a lot of people can suffer. You'd be surprised who can
Yeah.
suffer through things.
For
I've been to like marathons and triathlons, and they're just suffering through it. But I wouldn't even if they made it and they finished it, I would not say they were well conditioned
yeah,
at
for
all.
sure. No, not at all.
And I've always been a big proponent of conditioning. Even as much as I am a strength guy from young in the sports that I played, you had to be conditioned. And no matter what, I was never interested in who can bench the most or squatted the most. I like when I was younger, one of my things was like who can bench the most, squat the most, run the best 5K in the fastest mile, and can sprint and jump.
Yeah,
Now that's kind of like
absolutely.
what I always thought. It was like a well-conditioned person. They had strength, but they also can move through things.
Yeah,
And then when CrossFit came around, I think what CrossFit did was kind of open a lot of people's eyes up
yeah,
to a different form of conditioning
absolutely. Well,
because it really mixed things together and integrated them. So I caught a lot of people like with their pants down, not understanding conditioning as much.
I was one of those people for sure. I was
Yeah.
like, you give me a short sprint, I'll give you all I got for a 5 minute workout or a 3 round workout. But
Yeah.
then you start dipping into those 20-minute AMRAPs or 30-minute EMOMs that are built strategically, you start to see that your conditioning level is really, really low. Actually, I went to a seminar with Nick Fowler from
Mm.
Strength, and he introduced to
Good
me
coach.
flow sessions.
Yeah.
And when I started implementing flow sessions, I saw my aerobic base continue to just broaden bigger and bigger. And then I'm able to do these sprint workouts at a higher velocity with increasing speed as the rounds go on. So I'm a big component of conditioning. And then when you and I linked up a couple of years ago, you brought in my horizon to, long-term zone two work, building that aerobic base, and how aerobic, I guess, aerobic capacity was the basis for everything. Obviously, strength is number one, but if you are in great aerobic shape, you're able to have better output with your strength. And I know you and I love Joel Jameson. He talks a lot about it. And one of his posts was talking about long-term aerobic exercise is associated with greater muscle strength throughout your lifespan. I think a lot of people don't realize how big conditioning and strength and conditioning is for a longer, more sustainable life.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And there's different type of conditioning. And it kind of gets moved around a little bit. People understand it. And zone two is having like a big resurgence. But like I would say that less intense conditioning, because it like zone two has its place, but like
Yeah,
the less intense conditioning for long periods of time has a big place for building people's base. And then so do the more intense intervals do
yeah.
too.
So in conditioning, how important do you think it is for like you to understand your heart rate, like to understand what zone you're in? Do you think for general population here, we're talking not the 1% or the 2%ers, we're talking about general population. Is it that important to have awareness around your heart rate or to know what zone you're in?
So with general population, when you're dealing with them, and this is kind of like my opinion and my take from dealing with a lot of people and having a facility for a long, long time, it's yes, I would like them to know, but is it necessary? No,
Okay, I like that.
because a lot of people they don't want to think about what they're doing as much, even though I want them to, and I want it to be education.
Yeah,
It's not as necessary. It's got a lot to do with the programming that you're doing and the intent.
absolutely.
And if you can win them over with that and them trusting you and then pace, understanding how to pace and like the intent of the workout,
Hmm.
then you're going to get them there anyway. Like I like to say with general population, one longer medium intensity to less intense workout for longer duration. And it could be intervals, but it'd be longer interval. It'd be like a 10-minute interval
Yeah,
with some rest or a 15-minute interval. And then one more intense exercise, more like high intensity intervals, a little more.
yeah, yeah,
Um, those two alone, without getting into the weeds and knowing your exact heart rate and being in your exact zone, because those are really important. That's really effective. But
yeah.
those two alone would cover like 90% of the general population.
Absolutely. I think it's even more important that people realize that, like you said earlier, in this episode, that there's multiple forms of conditioning. And
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, they look at it like, I gotta go run 5K or I gotta go sit on a rower for 20 minutes. It's like there's so many different modalities and so many different intervals and gears and watts and outputs and repeated patterns of what you can do for conditioning and see a great response aerobically and even some of your strength, right? I think the whole point is to build that aerobic system, and you can be the strongest person in the world, but if you got no gas, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, personally. But
100%. If like what we were saying, like I can make it more effective,
yeah,
of course,
absolutely.
if they were wearing a heart rate monitor. I know
Yeah,
exactly they're in zone two, and if we went ahead and did the test, and we know what the thresholds are, and like when the lactate build up, but you're not going to be able to do that with general population,
exactly. You don't have
and
that.
and it's not
That's
necessary.
yeah. So yeah. So to my next point, when building a program, right? We are big people. We don't do a lot of cookie cutter programs. Like it's not all the time is it one size fits all, but there is one size can fit most people in a general idea when you have training at the masses, right? With conditioning, especially. What would you say is a great format for somebody who is listening to this podcast right now and they're like, hey, I suck at conditioning, right? Which most of the time we all do in some capacity, whether the intent of intent of the conditioning is high intensity or low intensity or moderate. What would you say is a good formula for somebody starting out? You're weak, you're working out 4 to 5 days a week. how many days of those should you be implementing some form of conditioning?
So if you're working out 4 days, I would say 2 days conditioning. One of the days, which is totally against what most of the time I would say, might even be after a strength, which I'm completely
Yeah.
against after a strength. Not completely, but it
Yeah.
depends. But if you're working out 5 days a week, then two conditioning days.
Okay. And one of
Um,
those days should be higher intensity, moderate intensity, or
we
you,
have one day moderate to lighter intensity for longer duration, and the other day for short, more power-based intervals.
yeah,
Now, if in most a lot of individuals, you'd be really surprised, they'll work out 6 days a week. And then I would say the third conditioning day I would consider would be more looking like a metcon, a mixed
yeah,
modality,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
which is much more intense. But once you start adding a lot more movements in, then you got blood pressure moving around,
Yeah.
and your body reacts a lot different.
Yeah.
The
I agree.
training that I tend to like to use a lot on conditioning is more the typical like bike, row, ski, versa climber slash that like sleds
Yeah.
deal. I tend to like to use those a lot because one is they don't tend to, you can put long durations in them and then you
Yeah.
don't beat up the body as much.
Yeah.
Once we start throwing in other movements, big global movements, weighted movements, then you got to kind of be careful because now you got to run into that running into your strength work a little
Yeah.
more.
Absolutely. I think going back to Joel Jameson, he said if conditioning is something you're trying to build, stop putting it right after your strength work. He talked about
Yeah.
like it should be the first thing you do, not the last thing you do.
Or
Um,
the only thing you did for the
or the
day.
only thing you did for the day. Yeah. I
Right.
think for me personally, like my opinion, I think it's very similar to what you're saying. If you have 4 days of exercise, two of those should absolutely be intended for conditioning, whether that be the primary focus or that is symmetrical, where you split the sessions, conditioning in the morning, several hours later after recovery, you can add in some form of strength component to it. A lot of my athletes, they do have 5 days of training, and two of those days are conditioning focus only, and then one day is a hybrid day where they are doing strength early in the morning, their choice, or conditioning at night, or they flop back and forth. And I'm obviously big on core training, and I implement a lot of that into some of those longer um, sessions of conditioning, carrying, you know, contralateral carries or unilateral carries. All those things I think are so big because you have that compromised breathing that you can really tap into when you're in that aerobic threshold of or training.
Yeah, I love mixing that in there. The thing is too with conditioning, you build your base and you kind of you have your intervals, you have your long, slower, moderate intensities,
Yeah,
but you kind of build a base and then you have your standard like more high intensity intervals. Like you get into like your 30-30s
yeah,
or 20-40s, 10-20, like you got there's a ton of different ways. We have our millionaire, which is short rest intervals,
yeah,
and then as interval gets more, the distance goes longer, but the rest still stays the same, really short. All those are great, but you tend to do them very standardized. And what I started doing, especially with CrossFit Open My Eyes, it was kind of CrossFit was so mixed and so chaotic.
yeah,
I started mixing a lot of the intervals together and started kind of seeing a lot of carryover to what actually happens in a CrossFit Metcon or workout
yeah,
because your body has to learn how to adapt with several different type of higher blood pressure going down, going up, heart rates jumping all over the place, breathing cadence going all over,
yeah,
learning how to control and deal with that. And
absolutely.
I've had like quite a bit of success with mixing the intervals together, which classically back in the day I would never do that. It would be 15 sets or 20 sets or 30 sets of a 30-30, and that would be it. Now it might be 10 sets of 30-30 going right into 10
Yeah,
sets of a 20, like a 20-40 into 10 sets of a 10. But
yeah,
you
yeah,
have to like mix that around, and
yeah,
then that's going to have the body adapt in different ways. But I will say, if you're only used to lifting weights and doing conditioning separately, you go and you hit a CrossFit workout or a mixed modality, you're going to be sadly surprised
oh yeah,
how bad it's going to feel if you
it'll
don't
make you
if you
feel like
don't
you
do that
haven't
type
done
of training.
anything. Yeah, it'll make you feel like you haven't done anything.
Well, that's what
The
CrossFit
body
did. It
doesn't
like
like it.
opened everybody's eyes. It caught a bunch of
Yeah,
people with their pants down. It's like it reminded me of MMA with when it first started UFC with
yeah,
Jiu-Jitsu.
yeah,
everyone got caught with their pants down, like, whoa, what do we do with these people?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so people, when
it's
they came into
crazy.
CrossFit, they were well-conditioned people, even hybrid athletes, and they got lit up pretty good.
Yeah,
But once you have a big base, your potential for mix is higher.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
there's no way around that, you
I
know?
agree.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Well, guys, thanks for listening to this episode, talking all things conditioning. If you guys have any comments or anything you want to add to this, by all means, write into us and we'll be happy to answer on the next episode.